today, this edition of Hyderabad Dialogues, we have with us Mohan Raghavan, Associate Professor of the Department of Biomedical Engineering at IIT Hyderabad. He also heads the Department of Heritage Science and Technology at the Institute, but also teaches at the Department of AI. He did his bachelor's in CSE Bangalore University and worked for around 6 years or more at Motorola before embarking on a PhD in computational neuroscience at the Indian Institute of Sciences, Bangalore. We are here mostly to talk about the department that he heads at IIT Hyderabad. The Department of Heritage Science and Technology focuses on preserving and developing both tangible and intangible assets, including monuments, heritage sites, etc., and Indic knowledge systems. You appear to be well versed both in science and technology as well as in Indian knowledge systems, and probably lead a happier life than many of us. Thanks for accepting the invitation and welcome to TNIE.
Sir, let me set the ball rolling with the first question. Yesterday, the Prime Minister Modi spoke about how culture connects India from north to south. He explained it beautifully, in fact, and I put it properly. So, since you are into heritage, and how are you? I'm interested in knowing how science and technology can be used to conserve our heritage, because we Indians, we don't have a sense of history, or at least that is what we traditionally, that's the thing. So what exactly is your department doing?
Right. Thanks a lot, first of all, for having me here. It's possibly a very different fora from the ones that I talk to every day. With students, and mostly it's with students, and that. And I think this is very different and a very exciting place to talk to you, because you are orders of magnitude better than us. I mean, we speak to students in the tens. You speak to them in possibly a couple of zeros more, right? So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to be here with all of you and have this wonderful talk. And the topic that you've asked about is something that is very close to my heart, something that excites me absolutely. It excites me as a scientist, as a technologist, as a person who's actually started and run incubators, and also as a heritage specialist, and as a student of Indian knowledge systems, and a faculty in that particular area. So across the board, it's something that excites me. One of the first things that people quite often find strange, just like you indicated, is that you seem to have a degree in science. You've done science, and then there is some technology. There is some you've done incubation, and then where does this heritage suddenly come up in between? I mean, so this is a number one question that people have about me when they look at it, and it's not surprising. And I'm it's a question I love to actually answer. So when we just look back and say, what is the role of science and tech in all of that we do, right? So what are the typical things that a university has? You have engineering departments. The most common amongst them are computer science. You have electrical engineering. It's all about circuits. Computer science is all about, let's say, programming and getting things done, at least in popular perception, right? And then you have AI now, and machine learning. You have mechanical engineering. You have civil engineering. For instance, when engineering started off in India, it was almost always about civil engineering, about building bridges, about building massive dams. Sir M. Vishweshwaraya's work. Then after a couple of decades, and it was a lot about building large machines. It's all mechanical engineering, heavy machinery. That is engineering. That's a real engineering, right? And then came the time of solid state circuits, and then electronics, and then there's bringing large electrical machines. Then it was electronics. Then engineering is electronics. I mean, the others are passe, right? So then comes the 90s, and then okay, it's all software. It's all about computers. It's all about, machines. It's all about embedded systems, phones, Internet of Things. And then finally, now it's all about AI and ML, and all hell is broken loose. Now today, if you're not working in data, AI, ML, then you are probably not even worth calling yourself an engineer. Right? So this is how things actually go from a popular perspective. But one must see what is the common thread that binds all of this, right? So all of these disciplines I've talked about, these are all engineering disciplines. But what underlies these engineering disciplines, it's basic sciences. And what does science do? Science asks the question how, why, how do things work, why is it like this, why is it like that, why does the sun rise and this way, why do the why are the plants green, why do the flowers bloom, all of these kind of questions. Why does an object drop, comes down, right? So you're curious, you want to know how things are, right? Now engineering is slightly the other side. In engineering, you are encouraged to ask questions more about how do I get this done, how do I achieve this, right? In that sense, it's a little more application oriented, it's more practical. So while science just concerns itself with curiosity and then tries to understand, then engineering says, how do I actually get things done and deliver some tangible utility to people, right? How do I make the bulb? How do I throw light in the lives of people, quite literally, right? And how do I allow people to communicate? How do I allow people to talk long distance? How do I allow people to get insights, right? So there is this subtle difference between science, there is engineering, but what are all of them doing, right? All of them are essentially trying to add value to people's lives, right? And what adds value to people's lives is what changes over generations, over centuries, over decades, right? So there was possibly a time when spices actually added spice to people's life, right? And at that time, the industrial activity was producing these kind of goods, which is spices, refining them, polishing them, and getting them to where people needed them, right? So producing goods, adding value, providing services, all of this is what constitutes industry, right? And this is what keeps the wheels of a nation running. So at one point in time, it was possibly spices that were actually moving. And if you look at it maybe earlier in the 19th century, the utility or adding value was in building houses, building buildings. Later on, what added large productivity to people's lives was to actually build machines. You build cars, you build machines that make large numbers of produce kind of goods. That adds a lot of value to people. It gives convenience to people, right? So this is how things kept moving. Now, if you look at all of science and tech in this broader perspective and see that it's always about adding value, now we know that anything that adds value is potentially a genesis of an industry, right? Anything that adds value is potentially the genesis of industry. And all of this computer science, electronics, mechanical, civil, etc., they are what they are because they're adding significant value to people's lives, right? And that is why people are willing to pay for them, and that is why there is economy in motion, and that is why there are jobs, right? And today, in a very, very practical way, if we look at it, anything that interests people, it interests largely because there are jobs in it. Otherwise, who goes and studies anything, right? So this brings us to the central question of what is very, very important for any country. It's bringing these jobs and getting industrial activity. And what does science and technology do? Science provides basic fodder. Because of its curiosity, it uncovers so many principles which then get used by engineering in order to actually deliver this value to people, either in the form of manufacturing goods or creating the services. So why did I make this long story? It is to put in perspective what is the role of science and tech, right? But while science and tech do this, the genesis of the value is often outside of the science and engineering itself. For example, when you're manufacturing, let's say, food, packaged foods or anything else, the genesis of that is actually in agriculture, right? So the produce that's coming out of agriculture is refined and then it is taken and delivered, and that's how you have, the biotech industry, sometimes the agri food processing industry, etc., etc. When let's say telecom or mobile phones are actually delivering value to people, what is it that people are actually consuming? It's not the phone, it's the content that's coming on the other side. Where is that content coming from? It's coming from the creative people, it's from the entertainers, it's the influencers. So that is the asset that is being processed through this chain and getting delivered on the other end, right? And that is why the fundamental assets that any country or any group possesses is the genesis, and then engineering and science and all of it together, takes it and delivers that value to people. So the assets are very, very important, right? And from this perspective, when you look at it, heritage is a fantastic asset. Heritage is a very big asset which sometimes goes below the radar and people don't realize. Why is it an asset? So now you can ask yourself the question, what is it that always brought people into India for centuries and millennia? Why did Fahia come here, right? Why did Khoisan come here? Why did the Arabs come here? Why did they interact? What did they want? They wanted the knowledge that was produced here, whether it was the knowledge of mathematics or whether it is the knowledge of yoga, meditation, Buddhism, all of this. That is what brought people here, right? Then later on, when they came here, they realized there is gold, there is also spices, they did a lot others, right? So there is a fundamental seeking or an asset, which is the ability to be happy. So production of happiness has been one of India's greatest exports. Even to this day, let's say, whether you look at, the Beatles or any of the other big folks coming in here, what did they come to India? Even today, India is slightly better off country, wealthy country, you have tech and all of that. But during the, decades when we were known as, the land of snake charmers and elephants and cows on the streets, even then, why did people come here? Because they wanted to, experience yoga, or, people had a very bad time in life, and then they just want to escape from it and go out in search of peace and happiness. And then that brought them to India. So that means India had always a fundamental asset, which was an understanding of, which was peace, contentment, happiness, joy, right? So this joy and happiness that seems so very common or something like that is actually not so common, like common sense, right? Common sense is not so very common. And similarly, joy and happiness and peace, which seems like very normal, is not very common. It was something very precious, and a lot of people didn't have access to it to that extent, and that brought people into India, right? So our understanding of happiness, our understanding of how do you do away with pain, is a fundamental asset. This is something to this day that people actually come to India for. And you will be surprised to know that you look at the broader, yoga industry, right, which runs on the premise that people in their busy lives have lost their happiness, and we want to rediscover ourselves and our happiness and be at peace with ourselves. The yoga industry is worth about, 30 or 40 billion dollars at least. It's a global market, and it's projected to reach up to like a 70 to 80 billion dollar market. What is Ayurveda? Today, everybody is in search of organics, right? Why? Because we've all consumed so much plastic, so much chemicals, so much everything. And then you see a study in the newspaper, our brains are full of, micro, nano plastics, whatever. And then immediately you call up, what shall I do about this, right? So, apart from these things, there are triggers that tell us, we need healthy living. We need sustainable living, right? So today there is such a big furor about sustainability, right? But sustainable living, and how do I live in peace with our surroundings and planet? This is a fundamental asset that was already there. It's a way of life for us. But when you lose that way of life, then it really becomes an asset. If everybody has it, it's commonplace. If only one person retained, everybody lost it, it becomes a huge asset, right? So now the sustainable way of living, right, is an asset. You look at our temples or forts or sculpture and all of that, this has got some kind of a very alluring beauty, right? And this now becomes an asset. Why do you think will people come to India? Will they come here to see cars and malls and our outer ring road, which is of course fantastic? But do you think people will come here all the way from a US or a Europe to come here? No, they won't come here to see this, but they might come here very well. They do to see sculpture, to see the beaches, maybe the snow. Even snow you can get in Switzerland, but you will not get yoga and panchakarma and beautiful temples, shore temples of Mahabalipuram. You will not get that anywhere. So it is a particular class of experience. Sometimes you can't even define what it is, but it is an experience that you seek. And for that experience, you're willing to come here. The cuisine that you get here is extraordinary, right? All over the world, we are known as the curry people. Right? So, you go to UK and then, they look at your Indians mean equal to curry. Right? I mean, we always were known for spices. At one point in time, Europe worried that, we are depleting gold, paying in gold for their spices. And this, pursuit of spices and, very fine cloth will actually ruin us. Right? So, these are all assets. And mind you, these are very, very unique assets that you cannot easily replicate. A tech industry today, DeepSeek comes, it replicates what OpenAI does. It's quite easy to take it away. But you can't take away the tag that is very fundamentally associated with people. So come what may, America is going to be known as the land of freedom, of the land of opportunities. Australia is going to be known for its sporting culture, right? You cannot take away the charm of a Venice by building canals, across our Musi River, right? So let's say even if we do it, you cannot replace Venice because that kind of impression, that image is stuck to it. It's very unique to us. And in a similar manner, heritage assets have this, ring fencing in the language of business. We have a very good moat around it. It's not easy for anybody to take away these assets, right? So the long point I'm trying to make, since this is a very informal conversation, is that heritage is a fantastic asset and it can actually be an engine that runs our country, right? And that is why heritage is a very important area to actually look at. And it is not just a jingoistic pursuit that suddenly you feel very emotionally attached and say, okay, Mera Bharat Mahan, let's try to do this, right? So it's not really like that, absolutely not like that. There's a lot of hard thought that goes behind things, especially when an IIT sets up a department for it. We have to pass through so many checks and balances and gates, convince a lot of smart people and tell them why this is really going to be useful for the country, right? And from that perspective, you start looking at it. Why is today computer science sought after? Because it has jobs. You take away the jobs from there, tomorrow nobody will go to computer science, right? And similarly, whenever you look at this industrial activity, heritage is an asset, and we did a lot of study around it. We found that today, as of today, our heritage assets are actually the root of industries that are worth about $350 billion. And at projected CAGRs in about a decade, around 2034, etc., it is poised to cross a $1 trillion market. Right? So heritage industries are that big. Like, today, and the reason why there is nobody really knows this is because it's going below the radar, because different parts of the heritage industry has got bundled under different heads and under different departments. For example, the Indic apparel, the Desi apparel, etc., is going under Ministry of Textiles and all of that, right? So nobody really knows this is a very distinct category under apparels, right? But it just goes under apparels and textiles. Food and cuisine goes possibly under agriculture, under something else, right? So nobody recognizes as a distinct category. Yoga goes under Ministry of Ayush or sometimes under healthcare in general, right? And similarly, every heritage asset is actually sitting under different headings, and people don't realize that the actual value that is coming from a lot of these enterprises is because there is a fundamental connect that people feel with it. Why do people wear, let's say, kurtas or khadis? Because it's class and you also feel kind of very connected to it, right? So when the PM goes abroad and meets a delegation of 10 important countries and then wears a kurta, then it becomes a fashion trend the next day, right? And everybody connects with it. Well, you could connect with some other kind of dress also, but but once you connect with this, then you can actually lay claim to it, right? I mean, even jeans are trendy, people use them a lot, but you can't say it's mine in a very unique sense, right? But you can lay claim to a kurta because it's yours. So this is how the heritage as an industry is very, very important for us, and why the pursuit of happiness, right? The neuroscience and that you talked about is a integral part of the heritage mix or the heritage milieu. And that is why I a lot of times wanted to talk not just about neuroscience and consciousness and happiness, because that is one part of this whole mix, but there is a lot more around heritage beyond that, which is food, cuisine, our apparel, the forts, the temples, the architecture, the music, the dance. All of this, you look at it, it's a fantastic opportunity, and it does not make sense to look at each of them in silos, because then you lose the synergies, right? So if you think of all of them together, synergize across it, you have a massive engine. It becomes easier to also understand it, make sense of it, and use it, right? And so this is the genesis of heritage science and technology as a department. In a sense, we are very unique. We are a lot of times Indian knowledge systems is thought to be an arts department, but we are a heritage science and tech department in the School of Engineering. And this is precisely the reason, because heritage is an asset. There's a lot of science and tech that goes in to develop these assets and actually deliver value to the people from these assets.
But how science and tech can be combined with heritage?
Right. So now we'll come to that. So now we know that there's so much heritage and there is so much assets value in this. How do we actually deliver the value to people, right? So let us say you take yoga for that matter, right? So we have yoga practices are all there. We know that at least for millennia we've known that this gives you relaxation and happiness, calms your mind, makes you much better, etc., etc. But then today, being the age of reasoning, people are going to ask you, is it really true? And somebody is going to tell you that no, it is not true, right? And hence today, if anything is going to be taken, you need clinical trials, you need to take it down that path. That can only happen by a scientific understanding of what yoga does. When you have clinical trials and all kinds of regulatory procedure for taking everything, when you have sports medicine, right? Sports was, who would have thought sports is science, right? Sports is entertainment. I mean, it comes under the Faculty of Arts anywhere you go, right? But is sport a science or not? It is. Today you have sports science universities, right? So when Muralidharan was reported for chucking in cricket, he lives in Sri Lanka. He plays a lot in the subcontinent, but he had to fly all the way to Australia to get his action examined. Why? Because they have the science behind it. They have the equipment. They have the scientific understanding to evaluate critically, understand what is the biomechanics of his action, and then give a certificate saying this is okay. Right? So there is science behind sports to understand. I mean, we see the sneakometers. We see third man, so much of technology in sports. Who would have thought that technology will actually run sports, right? Similarly, when you pick yoga, you need a large amount of science. You need neuroscience, you need physiology, you need to understand anatomy. You need to also have a lot of technology, computer vision, machine learning, all of it, for you to be able to deliver the value in yoga to people. And value yoga, delivering the value has many things. You have to ring fence it. You have to make systematic studies. You have to document the effects. You have to show what are the benefits. You have to show what are the safety issues. You have to protect people against accidental damage. You have to you have to allow the teachers to be able to effectively teach to students. you have to be able to allow the teachers to take care of the students. What if a student looks at a YouTube video, does something and sprains his back? Who's going to be responsible, right? So how will all of the safety measures come in? It will not happen without the understanding of the anatomy, physiology, the biomechanics, the neuroscience behind it. What is actually happening? When does it happen? When does it not happen? You may have discovered, let us say, a medicine. Okay, I know you take paracetamol, it's good for headache. Okay, some of us may be suffering from a headache, so you take a tablet, right? And how much of the tablet should I take? I don't know, maybe take a couple of them and then, and just put them, maybe 4 5. I mean, you could kill yourself, right? So there is a notion of dose. How much should I take? And how do you decide what the dose is? You'll have to do again systematic experiments. So how many repetitions of an exercise should I do? How many planks can I do before I actually kill myself or hurt myself, right? So similarly, even when you use yoga as a therapy, you need so much of scientific study behind it to be able to actually deliver it to people.
But I see that, especially in America, I mean, if you see Stanford University of Medicine, I think they have taken a lead in this. No, they do so much of research into breathing exercises, even Tai Chi, for instance. Tai Chi, of course, is very popularly practiced in China, but in Stanford University and Harvard, maybe in other universities in the West, particularly, they are far ahead in researching all these things. So where are we? I don't see any university doing this kind of research in our country.
There are two reasons. Absolutely, what you're saying is true in public perception. It is both true and it is both false. Okay, so true as in historically, yes, they put in a lot more money and resources into doing scientific research into it. In fact, one of the first experiments on yoga and meditation is about a century old. We have had experiments here in India that were done in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, and it has been there. Okay, so there are two reasons to this. One is, of course, the West did recognize the potential of this, put in a lot more resources and spent a lot more time doing understanding the science and tech behind it. That is true. But it is also true that what gets done in West gets more media, right? And this is another reason why that gets amplified. They are inherently good at marketing themselves. Typically, Indians have not been so good at marketing themselves, and definitely not in this area. So that is one of the reasons why we see it. Okay, so there is a component that they did put in a lot more. I mean, it's not that we were late to start. We started early, but we didn't follow it up. For example, do you know what is the earliest research into musical instruments, etc.? It was done by no less a person than Sir C.V. Raman, right? He studied in the 1920s, or he did fantastic research into Indian drums, tabla, mridangam, etc. He studied the acoustical properties of stringed instruments. How is sound produced there? He did a very beautiful classification. His papers are still classics, right? But have you heard of them? We don't. And that's because what comes from the West gets very easy media attention, right? And what comes from here gets, I mean, if you can imagine that the works of a Nobel laureate, the only Nobel laureate or science Nobel laureate from India for work in India, C.V. Raman's work is unknown practically in our own country about our heritage. You can imagine the work of other lesser men and women, right? So it is definitely, but have we done enough for our heritage and doing the science and tech behind it? I wouldn't say we have done enough. We have not, and it is precisely to rectify that now it is starting off, right? So with the NEP, there was a further impetus. So Indian knowledge systems is officially recognized as a discipline, or a set of disciplines that need to be taken care of across the country. Multiple people are starting off. We started one of the first departments of heritage science and technology, and we do the science and tech behind a variety of these different areas right now, right? So we have a lab for yoga and performing arts to look at the performance, measure movement, understand what's happening behind the scenes when anybody moves, whether it is in yoga or for performing arts, dance, etc. We have labs for understanding music instruments, acoustics. We have labs for understanding data science, the data science behind all the data that's there. There's a huge amount of data actually.
How do you go about it, sir? I mean, and then you take some certain book like yoga Pradipika. I mean, that's the standard book for yoga. So, how do you do the research? I mean, if there is certain posture or certain breathing technique, I mean, there is from basics to the top. But you need a qualified student for that.
Yes. Yes.
And then you need to rigorously, I mean, do you do MRI or what kind of research goes in? I mean, what exactly is the research area there?
Right. So you take any particular thing. I mean, you talked about Hatha Yoga Pradipika. Okay, so we can start from there. So Hatha Yoga Pradipika, let's say it picks up on it talks about several kriyas. Okay, let's say Trataka. Right. So what does Trataka do? It is looking at a lamp continuously. Right. So now if you have this, and this is very common, a lot of times yoga schools do teach Trataka. You have a lamp in darkness and you have to keep looking at it, concentrate on the on the small flame of the lamp, etc. So now if you pick something like this, now you start asking yourself the question, okay, what is happening here? Right. And that is so here is where the science sets in, because you're curious now. We've had a tradition that says that this is somehow beneficial, and now you ask yourself the question, how is this going to be beneficial? Now, how do you approach this? Now, the details of the authentic primary references for this practice are in Hatha Yoga Pradipika, let's say, right? So you need somebody who will read Hatha Yoga Pradipika, who will be able to understand it and know what is authentically done. Of course, you can go to any yoga class down the street, they will tell you some version, but research doesn't start there. It has to start with the primary research, primary references and primary practices. Look at the history of the practice, all of that. So you obviously need skills, people who can understand a little bit of Sanskritam, who actually can read the text. Just reading Sanskritam is not enough. If you know English, it doesn't mean you can understand rocket science and aeronautics, because there are so much technical details that you need to grasp. So you need to know Sanskritam to access that language, but you also need the technical words, which is what is called as paribhashika shabd in Hindi or Sanskrit. So you need to know the technical words. So that is one set of courses. So in our programs, for example, we run a course on an MTech in yoga technology, right? And in that course, a bunch of subjects are like this. You have to have a course on Samkhya, you have to have a course in Yoga Shastra, and you have a course in Ayurveda. So you read the primary texts, you understand what is there in it, what is the perspective, what are the vyakhyas of that, how has that been interpreted, how has that been put into practice. So this is one side of it. Now when you do it, now you ask yourself the question, how do I measure it, right? So what should you measure? Should you measure your eye blinks? What is the force that is exerted on your cheeks when you actually do it, on your eyebrows when you do some particular exercise? Or would you like to measure what's happening in my brain? Would you like to measure what's happening in the muscles? Are the muscles relaxing? Are the muscles getting tightened? Is getting tightened something inherently bad? Is it good? What's happening in your brain? Should I put an EEG? Should I put an MRI? Right? So these are the next set of questions you do. So you initially start with characterizing what's happening. So before you pass any judgment, we just want to understand what's happening. It's curiosity. So you use multiple modalities. You would, depending on what the experiment is, you would either use an MRI sometimes. MRI is difficult because you have to go inside the tunnel. But if you want to do it in an open natural setting, you use EEG. And then you have to regulate the environment. Now you have very practical issues. If you want to look at something like Trataka and say, I want to measure it, every experiment has to be controlled. So you'll say, now what lamp should I, what kind of a lamp should I see? If I have 10 subjects doing the same thing and I want to understand that what that practice is doing, I must get 10 subjects who are not doing that practice and 10 subjects who are doing that practice. And then I have to compare between them. And now you also ask yourself the question, oh, okay, those 10 subjects who didn't do the Trataka, what should they be doing? Should they be doing anything at all or not doing anything at all, right? So what is a good control for this, right? So these are the kinds of scientific questions you grapple with in the experimental design. You ask yourself now, what should be other control? Let us say you have a lamp, okay? And the wick of an oil lamp will, shake. right? So maybe when two subjects saw it, there was a wind blowing and then the lamp was all over the place. Maybe it even, it got extinguished. The next 5 people who saw it was steady. So how do you average these results? Are they the same? Is the experiment the same? Right? So these are the kinds of questions that you would have to grapple with in experimental methodology, right? And also you have to decide what kind of equipment you should have. Should I have an EMG plus an EEG plus an eye blink sensor plus maybe an EOG electrooculogram to look at my eye? So and apart from that, should I also document what's happening with the rest of the muscles? So all of this comes from a deep understanding of how brain neuroscience works, and you should know where to look for, right? And then you do all of this, and then let's say then the next stage is to actually understand the data, interpret the data, understand what's actually happening.
But have you done many such experiments?
These are all ongoing. A lot of experiments on this kind are ongoing.
Example.
So Trataka is an example. We are looking at Trataka. We are also looking at yoga and the issues of safety around yoga. We are also looking at things like what is the best way in which yoga teachers can teach a student over an online or a video mechanism, right? So yoga is a skill, right? So now if you come physically to a class, I can say, okay, no, you're not bending, you're bending too much, or you're not bending enough. You have to bend a little more. And then, you possibly give a little bit of a support and say, okay, bend a little more. Okay, now stop. What do I know? Now I know because you're holding the person, you can sense the muscle tone and say you stop or you do a little more. But when you're on a video call, what do you do? How do you, guide a student on the other side? So this is a technology problem. So this is an engineering problem. The first one was a science problem. This is a technology or an engineering problem, and both kinds of problems need to be solved. So and that is why it is called heritage science and technology. So we have multiple projects going on of this kind. I mean, Trataka is one example. Another example is documenting, as in exactly measuring how much a person is doing. So, for example, today you have a lot of yoga apps, right? And every yoga app will tell you, you put that app in front of you, and then you do your exercise, and then you just follow whatever the exercise is being done. Right? Now, how safe is this? At what time should you stop? When should you do something different? Right? So these are some of the very practical and technology issues, and you try to understand how do you do this, right? So for that, you'll have to make efficient ways of actually measuring people's movements, just like sports medicine does, exactly measure people angles, etc. You take gold standard and understand how good is that measurement. Is the measurement correct? So these are technology issues that one will have to grapple with, right? And then you have other questions. Sometimes I gave you a lot more utilitarian examples. Let me take you to the other side, right? So sometimes you have you have experiments on meditation, right? And you want to understand, so what is samadhi? Is this person actually in samadhi? What constitutes samadhi, right? These experiments are very, very difficult to do largely because of unavailability of subjects. So multiple groups will have to collaborate to do this kind of experiments. It will be done once in a while. Sometimes you get to be part of those experiments. Sometimes you do the experiments yourself. Sometimes you are a reviewer for experiments that somebody else has done. So everybody contributes in different ways. And then you have to ask yourselves the fundamental questions like, what is samadhi, right? What does samadhi really mean? What does dhyana really mean? What does meditation really mean, right? So what does pratyahara mean, right? So now you will have to, so somebody is saying that, okay, I am in samadhi now and I came back. So how do you, measure this? How do you substantiate? How do you measure? It's okay. We don't intend to, invalidate or do anything on people. It's just a very valid scientific question on what are the characteristics of samadhi, right? Or things, questions like this.
I mean, samadhi is a little bit, it's too high.
Correct, right?
So
it's too high.
for a common man, for instance, if
Right.
I look at some of the podcasts or some of the books that I read, mostly from Westerners, so there is a scientific backing to it. What happens, suppose for instance you do a certain breathing exercise, they bring in psychology and everything. Nowadays the mental health issue is a big thing. So there are experiments there, and how it affects your body, how it affects your brain, how many neurons are there. I mean, does your department do any such kind of studies?
Absolutely,
I mean,
absolutely.
I read in one of the books that I read recently, the conscious breathing. I know there was a certain science behind it, and how much oxygen should you take, how much carbon dioxide should be there, how it affects your brain. I mean, this kind of thing that they're putting out in public and coming out with it. And did we do any such
Oh,
studies?
there is lot of it. There is lot of science, lot of papers published in
But
from
it's
Indian.
not in the public domain. I
Oh,
don't
it is
know.
in the public domain, but it doesn't catch the attention of media. I mean, post this, I can give you tons of such literature that is outside by Indian researchers, experiments performed in India and published in journals. But taking it to the newspapers is not something that we can do.
How long has this research been going on in India?
See, research in yoga has actually fortunately been one of those that has started off very early, right? So in the mid 90s itself, there's a lot of Nimans does a lot of work. You must have heard of Nimans,
Yes.
right? So Nimans has done a lot of work in this area. They started, they've been doing for quite a, in fact, I can tell you that, one or two generations before me already started experiments on this. I got drawn into this field looking at, my uncle and his colleagues doing experiments of this kind, right? So it's not at all new. It's absolutely not new. See, experiments of this kind have been done 100 years ago. Some of them have been documented, some could not be documented, some have been documented with delay, right? Sometimes you do have things like fantastic experiments done in, let's say, 70s or 80s, okay, where you have had a subject of yoga now, and then the subject is actually the subject is actually, let us say, in samadhi, and you are trying to measure what actually happens, right? So as per the theory of yoga, etc., when a person is actually in samadhi, he is completely cut off from the external world, largely because it's pratyahara is to take it back. That means you are kind of disconnected in some way from the external world. To what extent, etc., depends on whether you're talking of the Buddhist practices or the yoga practices. Very subtle differences of methodology, etc. So now there have been beautiful experiments where a yogi in samadhi has had light shown into his or her eyes, and then you're recording from the brain, because this is not something you can fake. You can pretend to be asleep, but even if you're if you're not asleep and the light is shown, the brain will record it. You can't control at that level. So people have actually done this kind of experiments and actually shown that the brain is really disconnected from your external. Whatever signal that you give, the stimulus doesn't go through. But this result was not published. Why? Possibly because the subjects in concern said that they wanted some time bar on publishing it for whatever reasons, and it is likely to come out, and in some time from now. Right. So for these reasons also sometimes you don't see them, but there have been documented experiments. I mean, the documented experiments, I mean, you must have all read in the book about Swami Rama, and then the Kaivalya Dham has performed experiments in 1920s, 30s, etc. And several others have performed it in 50s, 40s, 50s. So Ashtanga Yoga Vijnana Mandiram in Bangalore, so they've performed a lot of these experiments, but their experimental documentation has been published with some delay, right? So lot of such organizations are there. I mean, there are fantastic researchers who have published. There is a university for yoga called S. Vyasa, right, in Bangalore, set up in late 80s, 90s. Their full university is about yoga. They keep publishing so much about it. There are there's tons of work out here, but what happens in the West grabs media attention. I think this is something that we all need to figure out. How do you crack this news cycle? That's something I'm honestly, academics are probably bad at.
Best also is an advantage in academia. So any mistake, for instance, come across about how Kulasekara Alvar is being dated post Ramanuja by Western scholars. That mistake was pointed out long ago by scholars in Tamil Nadu.
Correct.
But that mistake keeps getting propagated because they cite each other and it goes
absolutely on. Absolutely. I think this is something that happens. this is this is an academic phenomenon. It happens all the while. There is no point in pointing fingers at somebody. We have to up the game. That's all I can say. But absolutely, what you're saying is true. It happens in all the fields across heritage sciences. It happens with yoga. It happens with history. It happens with archaeology. It happens with language. It happens with It has happened.
Speaking of that, recently you invited Arthra, right? For
Yes.
that talk on
Yes, Indus description.
So in that, even Western scholars, Edwin Bryant, for instance, talks about ideological McCarthyism. If anyone talks about, say, a relook at the AMT or AIT or whatever, then they would be labeled the nationalists or
yes.
And so you invited him, but I got to know recently that even now that is the case in even top Indian universities that they look. So did you have any apprehension before inviting him? And you know how the media can report it as well, right? So
very well know that. So let me answer it in this way. So the phenomenon that you're talking of does exist. It has existed for a long time. So does it make people apprehensive? Yes, it does. You don't even have to go so far as to invite X, Y, or Z. We've seen times where even talking about heritage is enough to get you labeled, and even now to some extent sometimes it does happen. But I don't really think much about these things. Opinions will be there. Opinions are going to be there. I focus more on positive activity. I have clearly seen there is evidence for what heritage is, what it can do. So the way I look at it is that it's the onus is on the people who believe. Science is all about conviction, right? Galileo thought what he was researching on is right? The whole world was against him, but he just went ahead with it, irrespective, playing even his life at risk. And that is the conviction that drives science. That's the conviction that science drives academia. And so sitting in academia and being a scientist and an engineer, I wouldn't really even complain about it. If I have the conviction, then I will go ahead. I have it and I will go ahead. And that's what drives us to create this department, grow it, work on it, bring larger and larger sets of people into it, and we work on it.
One more thing. In heritage, we talked about yoga. That is one big aspect of it. But we have temples also, many temples.
Right.
From Kedarnath to the south. So, but most of them, I think, if I look at Kedarnath, for instance, nobody knows who built it. There is a popular mythology, whatever, but scientifically, for example, Tirupati is that there are certain inscriptions, but we don't know beyond that point. So scientifically, is it like carbon dating? Do you do such kind of research?
So,
or how to preserve temples, because most of them are not well maintained.
So when you look at heritage, the way heritage is broadly classified is tangible and intangible heritage. Right? Tangible heritage is everything that is physically available, that you can touch, feel, see. Intangible is in the form of knowledge, in the form of skills that you cannot touch, feel, but it does have a definite effect. So at our department, we work across the board on all aspects of heritage, and in applying science and technology to it. We do look at temples, forts, structures, inscriptions. We look at the history behind it. We also look at the intangible, etc. But you can see that this is a very, very, very vast area, and no one person can work across the. So what heritage science and tech, our department, tries to do is it tries to bring in a large set of people with different varying expertises across different universities in India and abroad, and brings them together under our department to work on these various problems. For example, problems of the kind that you talked about. If you want to, let's say, understand what's happening on this particular temple and its inscription, so the amount of expertises that is going to be required to do something like this is like mind-numbing. You need a historian, you need an archaeologist to be able to take it, you need an epigraphist who can actually understand reading, somebody who's familiar with the different scripts, that particular period. You need a super specialist who specializes in that period. You need people who have skills and expertise in machine learning, in image processing, to be able to take it. You also need a bunch of data experts, because this data has to be corroborated with all the other epigraphical data, or Epigraphia India has published tomes of work for a century now. Data is lying there in the archives. Somebody has to corroborate it and say this is what matches well with this. uh, the amount of disciplines that are required are very huge, and we do put together such teams both dynamically and statically as it comes to look at these kind of problems. So a lot of details I cannot directly reveal as of now, because a lot of them are projects that are ongoing, and we are prohibited from actually revealing which projects we are working on. But I can tell you, let's say there are certain, let's say, archaeology projects, right? Some artifacts coming from a certain place, etc. So we put together interdisciplinary teams of, let's say, chemists, because chemistry is required for a lot of this dating. You need a different kind of expertise to actually understand, do spectrography on it, spectroscopy on it. You need some understanding of materials. Material experts has to come in. You need a paleobotanist. You need a geneticist to look at the genetic material. You need a data scientist to actually put them all together. And after you put them to present your case, you need to actually visualize it. So you need an AR VR expert. You need a history expert. You need an expert sometimes in a particular language, right? So we do put these kind of teams together from amongst our own faculty, from multiple different departments, and work on these kind of mission mode projects. But the exact details of which ones I cannot talk about until they are actually out.
For preserving and developing sections, so many of the temples you see now are whitewashed. For instance, you mentioned the Shore Temple in Mahabalipuram.
Correct.
In Kanchipuram, you might have gone to the Kailasnatha in Kanchipuram. You see the initial Mahindra before the Narasimha. It's been
Correct.
completely destroyed. Is there any way to restore it? There is other temples as well. Amareshwara, just near Kanchi, near Kamakshi Mandir.
Correct.
It's been completely.
Correct. So this is a broader issue of preservation. And this is an area where both policymakers and technologists and scientists need to closely work together, along with the custodians who are the ASI, of course. So is everything perfect, hunky dory? Obviously not. There is a lot of scope for better coordination between the various stakeholders that need to come in. That is definitely the case. But I wouldn't say nothing is being done. There is a lot of work that's being done, but sometimes there are two kinds of problems. One is sometimes there is a genuine problem of coordination and not bringing in sometimes the right stakeholders, etc., etc. But beyond that, in spite of people's best efforts, the amount of heritage treasures that's across the country, if you actually had to take care of every single one of them, it's a gargantuan effort. You need an orders of magnitude different organizations and scale to be able to do that. So these are some of the reasons why some such efforts seem to be in public perception, it seems like, oh, there is a missed opportunity. These are missed opportunities. What you're saying is absolutely true. They should be preserved well. It requires people from multiple expertises actually being there.
But can it even be restored, that part, if you remember?
Well, it's tough to give a pronouncement in that it can be, it cannot be. Just sitting here miles away, this is a very technical topic. One will have to actually make a full-fledged study to say whether what is the extent of loss and whether it can be fully recovered, partially recovered.
Maybe eventually we can.
Correct. So see, that is the other question. See, lot of times when we talk of preservation, preservation of whether culture or cultural artifacts, etc., we think that a lot of times, putting up nice fences, cleaning it up properly, making it spick and span, and keeping it is preservation. Okay. So, but this sometimes is actually turns against it. I mean, what is actually preservation? So, when I ask a hospital, is a hospital well preserved, right? So, what does it mean? Bar entry of all people into that place, everything is perfect. You can go around in single file into the operating theaters, rooms, ICUs, everything come out in a single file. Everything is as it is today, tomorrow, day after. Would you call this as perfectly well preserved hospital? To actually have patients to nurture them back to health and send them back, right? What is a school if maintained like a museum? What is a hospital of use if it is maintained like a museum, right? So the meaning of preservation is not like museumifying everything, and this is one of the dangers of excessive talk of preservation, because preservation always goes into museumification. The real way to preserve heritage is to make sure it is alive and throbbing and a living experiential place. We need experiential museums. The best way to preserve or even disseminate experience of the heritage is not to museumify. It is to actually get it into actual working the way it was functioning centuries ago, and then allow people to observe a living, throbbing heritage place, immerse in it, feel it, get the vibes, enjoy, revel, and then come back. That is the real, experience.
Like suppose I visit Golconda Fort.
Correct.
So now it is in partially ruined. I mean, more or less.
Correct.
But if I can visualize, or if virtually, if you can recreate how it was earlier.
Correct.
When it was
I would
not
go
there.
much. I would go a step further. Not just virtually recreate. To the extent possible, actually restore some of the actual functioning that was there, and get life actually going through those places. Like, say for example, virtual reconstruction. Yes, today a lot of it is actually happening, but typically a lot of times what happens is, as soon as maybe a site takes over, that place becomes out of bound to people and normal. So the best way is to study how did life go on there. Maybe the small vendors in the temple or in the fort, they're actually walking in and out. A couple of horsemen, cavalrymen going in, going out, the darbars functioning the way they were before, the courts actually happening on some kind of a lower scale, and people now actually get to go through it in real life and observe it without doing it. I would say that is going to be a much better prospect for heritage preservation than focusing obsessively only on cracks and crevices and things like that.
And does your department do any this kind of actual?
Oh yeah, we do a lot. So if you come to our department, we can show you multiple such virtual recreations and also physical recreations. So we also work on methods for 3D printing, such structures. How do you print these in 3D, but like Lego blocks? Right, so we have a Lego block of a temple in our of the Ramappa temple, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So there is some technology that goes into it. Some engineering problems have to be solved before you can convert it into a Lego block type thing. So we have a temple that you can disassemble or assemble. So whenever school kids etc. come, we make this a game for them. Right, then we disassemble all the pieces. We tell them, see, this is the structure, this is how it is. Get yourself prepared. A team of 6 people or 7 people, and say, okay, on your marks, get set, go. 3, 2, 1, go. Okay, and then you time them, and then they go and put it all together, and then the entire temple comes up, and then you time it and say, okay, you did it in like 19 minutes or 23 minutes. That's something that gets kids very excited. But in this process, they actually learn what are the different parts of the temple. I mean, what is it called? How do you put them together? How is the fitment done? So it becomes a very beautiful experience for them, and
the public has no access to it.
So we are trying to. So for example, this is exactly what we are trying to do. We have built modules of heritage experience centers. What kind of games are there? What kind of games should be there? We have even worked out the economics behind setting up such experience centers in World Heritage Sites. Any site today, any government in the country today says, this is the heritage site and I want to set up an experiential center around it, we are willing to support it. We have all the expertise. We have done these pilots. We have done studies of the economy behind it. We know how to set things up. Anybody who is who would like to do this, we are most happy to support them in this venture, because we have a lot of pieces.
Already been established in place.
So we did one trial. So we worked with the Ministry of Tourism. They wanted us to do a pilot on the Ramappa temple in Warangal. So we actually went there. We studied the place, understood what are the economic issues. The ministry's perspective was slightly different. They wanted us to understand how we can improve livelihoods around these sites. It's a very, very important concern, because if the locals are not involved, they don't see value for themselves in a heritage place, their cooperation in the upkeep of that place goes down. They should not start feeling that by this becoming a superstar place, people coming from outside are benefiting, but what is there in it for us, right? If that thought creeps into their mind, then their connection with the place goes down. So the ministry wanted us to look at how we can increase tourism potential using this particular thing. So we visited it. The local collectorate also facilitated. We made a study of that place. We understood what are the local issues, what kind of skills are there in that local place, and based on that we made a proposal of this is what can be done. These are the experience centers, these are the games that one can set up, this is how roughly the footfalls are going to be, projected footfalls, this is what is going to be the revenue earned, how will you set it up, how much land is required, what is it. So all of those plans we did make at, in association with the Ministry of Tourism and also the local collectorate of Mulugu.
When was this?
This was about a year and a half back.
Anything very implemented?
Possibly not yet. Maybe it is in the works.
Sir, you spoke about heritage prevention and how archaeologists and scientists and everyone should work together to prevent it. But the public is also a very important aspect to play here, because even they play an important role in preventing the heritage. So what do you have to say about that?
So what do you really mean that prevent? You mean prevent destruction of heritage?
Yeah,
Preservation of heritage.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Without people's participation, this is never going to happen. And it is also pointless to just complain and say people are being they're showing apathy. People will flock to a place when there is value in it for them. So it's up to us, whether it is the technologists, others, to show and deliver that value to them. We have to show what is in it for them, right? And then people will. Why will they not flock to it? So I would say the shoe is on the other foot. It's on the establishment. It's on policymakers. It's on academicians. It's on all of us to make sure that it gets people interested in it, right? And if we make it interested, definitely people are absolutely not short of enthusiasm or passion to preserve their heritage at all. So whenever we have given them that small opportunity, people have thronged and crowded and come over that place. It's absolutely true, but definitely important to get people involved in this. Otherwise, preservation is impossible.
The Ramappa example that you mentioned, what specific suggestions that you?
So in the Ramappa example, see, people always have this general, perception that, for example, I'll tell you, whenever there is a very big temple or a place, people around over a long period of time, they've found a way to make livelihoods out of them. You sell some fruits, some flowers, you sell some, plastic whistles, some plastic stuff, all within just outside the temple gate. You get maximum footfalls because people pass through that place, and then you make some small amount of money, 5K, 10K, etc. Now, when it becomes a UNESCO World Heritage Site, the rules say that you should have a perimeter of say 500 meters or something like that, and these people should be moved to the other side. Now, it is now from a people's perspective, how do they see it? They don't know about the UNESCO regulation. They don't know what is the plan, what is the projected plan. For them, the thing is, we were in prime place to sell things. We have been thrown out. Tomorrow, I don't know who is going to come. Maybe it is this fellow's brother, that fellow's brother-in-law, this fellow's mama, bhatija, bhanja, whoever it is. They will come, they will take my place. This is their apprehension, right? So now how do you get this apprehension to, go out, right? So And this cannot be undone until you actually tell them. And we actually had this issue. We went there with the collectorate taking us. The moment we came in, the people thought we were also some kind of government officials. They just mobbed us out and said, what is happening? We have been thrown out, we have been this, that, etc. So we just listen to them. I tell them, you please tell us what, because our job is, as technologists, we have to make a plan, suggest to the government how this can be. It's not in our hands to actually do it, but then it is our job to listen to them. We listen to what their issues were, and this is exactly what they said. They said, I was earning with selling. I asked them, what were you selling? So somebody said flowers, somebody said plastic whistles, and they pointed me to the same stuff that you will find outside every tourist place. Right? So I and they were selling, my land, this is gone, that is gone, all of that. So I just very casually asked them, I completely understand what your problems are. I'm just trying to see if I can help you. Do you think it will help you? I asked them, how much were you earning before? He said, we were earning 10K per month. Sometimes on a good day, maybe up to 15K. I told them, now if do you actually want that same shop selling plastic at the same spot, etc., or you're concerned about earning? If tomorrow somebody gives you a way to earn 20K, whether you're asked to sit here or sit there, do you think you have a problem? We have no problem. You give us back our way to earn 25K, I'll take anything. You tell me to sit there also, I will sit. I have no problem. I said, absolutely. So, so that means it's a very clear indication to policymakers and to technologists that you design what is the need of the moment. Need is their earnings are affected, and that is a redressal that we owe them. So that is why we went back to the board. We said, how is it that one can create a mechanism for them to earn that 20K? And projecting for inflations, etc., by the time it gets implemented, 25K is what will be on par. So we said, let's find what it will take. And the first thing we said is, now if you sell low value goods like plastic, whistle, there is no differentiator. How are you connecting with that particular site? Unless you connect with that particular site, the public is not going to be paying. If I tell that I went to Ramappa temple, I came back with a plastic whistle and some plastic toys, my kids will not take it, right? They'll say, what has that got to do? But if I tell them that I came back and I'm giving you a laser hologram, some 3D of the Ramappa temple, and this is the memento for you because I went there, they'll hold it and then they'll go around showing to somebody else, right? You need to be able to connect with that place. And that is what technology does. And this is not something the poor people in that area can. I mean, this is not their job. It's our job to have, done it for them. And so we made proposals saying what kind of goods, what kind of services should actually go there. We proposed an experience center. We said there'll be a virtual temple, just like we did here. People can do Lego blocks, and that will be like, a 15 minutes. Then we budgeted next to 20 minutes, etc., for a game where in virtual world you can actually walk through the temple, and you can actually take a selfie in the virtual world at any place you want. When you actually go to the temple, you can only be on the ground. Correct. But what if I am able to fly near the Shikhara and then take a selfie in virtual world, right? So this is a unique proposition. You cannot get it anywhere else, right? And then we said, okay, maybe there is another game that you can play. So the floor of the experience center by virtual reality becomes a temple, right? And as you walk to different places, the history of that place opens up with an avatar and then tells you something, right? So now what is it that these people will have to do? You have one person who takes care of each stall. You anyway need somebody to take care of a stall, and that's what these people can do. If we or government subsidizes the technology capital cost for setting it up, then the people as a cooperative can possibly. The exact numbers will depend on what is the size, what is all of this. But we worked it out with a couple of our students who are actually management consultants in various things. Our program is a very unique program, our MTech program. It's a working professionals program. So the students in our program are actually working professionals in these, top 4 kind of management consultants, or they are doctors, or they are professionals in various places. They should have engineering or science, any engineering or science. And so with the help of a lot of these professionals, we made up that. they also did the economic calculation on what it takes, and it was actually not much at all. It was something very much within the reach of what a government or other things can.
Since you've been a part of a lot of research projects and you yourself have done a lot of research, what is the one project that is really close to your heart? Can you share some things about
Right.
that?
Okay, so right now, one of the projects that's really close to my heart is around data. Right. So I think I've talked about a lot of other pieces. So maybe this is one project I can talk about. So when you today, you know that data is gold, right? And today, understanding and data about every aspect of Indic heritage is very, very, very important, right? Understanding of language, dialect. We know language and dialect changes every few kilometers here in India, right? With the language spoken in Hyderabad is different from what is spoken in Warangal. It's different from what's spoken maybe somewhere else, Siddipet, or then you go down south towards Kurnool and into Andhra, it changes, right? So language, accents, words, books, literature, costumes, cuisine, music, all of this is a huge, tremendous storehouse of data. And data today has value because it's going to actually feed into the experiences that people have, right? And today, nobody really has that kind of quality of data about Indian heritage. Only some companies do have on specific aspects, like say for example Microsoft has a lot of data about various dialects that is spoken across the country, because for them voice enabling is a huge market for them, it's of interest, but nobody really has that kind of data. So we are currently in the midst of a particular project where we are creating a consortium, an academia led consortium where everybody can participate. We can come here and we are building data stacks that any heritage enterprise can actually use, right? So for example, if you are a temple tour planner, right, so where is the data about all of these temples, about the how to get there, about the history, etc.? This is now a multimodal and multidisciplinary data set that you need. So we create these data stacks, we provide data services on top of it, such that the heritage industry can come in and start building applications on top of this. So this is one of the projects that we actually. So this is actually pure data science. So right now this is not yet out in the public. It will shortly get released. We'll talk about it more. That is exactly why we are doing it. This is an AI ML project. The starting point for AI ML is data, right? And only when you have data, you have AI, you have ML, you have generative AI, you have agents, you have bots, all of that comes in. And so this is something this is one project that's very close to my heart, because it's at the interface of all these three departments that I'm talking about. It brings in understanding of biomedical engineering and healthcare. It brings in understanding of heritage science, and then AI is at the center of it, right?
So, sir, coming back to your department that you had, Heritage and Technology, uh, students are not much exposed to heritage and all, right? So, I mean, as much as they're exposed to AI, machine learning, etc. So, how do you actually attract students to pursue this? There are such courses. I mean, to bring awareness or to pursue such courses.
Oh, very good. I mean, it is quite. It's at the same time very easy, and it's also very difficult to attract people. And I'll tell you what is easy and what is difficult, right? So once you reach out to people and you tell them what we do, it's very easy to attract them. But actually reaching out to people is relatively difficult for people like us in the academia, where we are already in the midst of so many things. It's much easier for people like you, and this is where I would really look to your help to see how we can get the word around. So this is the third year running. We have already completed 3 cohorts of this MTech in Heritage Science and Technology. It's a very unique program that blends together Indian knowledge systems on one side, science on the other side, and technology on the side. These are the 3 pillars. So we have all of them coming together to offer very, very unique streams of MTech. It's a full-fledged MTech, but for working professionals. Why is it for working professionals? Because like you said, this is a new area. And in new area, for a fresh student to jump in, it is a little bit of a risk. and they will obviously be a little apprehensive. But for a working professional, the stakes are much lower, and a lot of working professional today in the late 20s and 30s, they are looking to move laterally into different areas. There's a lot of passion, there is a lot of drive, there's a lot of industrious thought, and saying everybody wants to do a startup, everybody wants to experiment with their passion. There is a very clear newfound trend where people in their late 20s, once they feel they're comfortable in their careers, they now want to mix their passion with their profession, right? And for these people, these are the people who typically come to our programs. Typically a tech professional has about, say, 5 years of experience, and he says, now I have enough skills and I have no worry about survival, I will anyway survive, right? So, and these are the people saying, okay, I'm passionate about temples, right? How can I use my technical skills and somehow do something in the area of temples? So this person comes in here and takes up, let us say, an MTech. We have one of the streams that we offer is conservation and reconstruction of architecture, right? So we have people like this coming here. They go through this course where they learn about temple architecture, the Vastu Shastra, as in engineering, architectural principles of construction. They also do technology, learn AI, ML here, and put them all together to create technological solutions for visualizing temples, or to create some ecosystem business around temples. Maybe somebody else is as an embedded systems engineer with a passion for yoga. So this person comes in here, he learns about yoga, it also gets hands-on technology, and then builds systems for yoga related stuff, right? So build technology for safety in yoga, let us say, like the one I was talking about. So this is how. And then there is maybe somebody who's already a generative AI engineer, right? But now is very passionate about Sanskrit. So he comes to our course, learns courses on Shiksha, Vyakaranam, Chandas, Niruktam, etc., which is basically phonetics, prosody, grammar, etymology, takes all of these courses, and then now applies, uses it in the context of computational linguistics and generative AI, make, fantastic tools, open source them, and do a lot of. This is the kind of people who actually gravitate towards our program. Very successful professionals, very talented folks, but very passionate about heritage. So they want to mix their tech and heritage together to come in here. But broadly, the way we are doing it is, this is how we started. We started with these 3 or 4 streams. The 4th stream that I did not talk about is archaeometry, right? So all of these 4 streams. But the best part of it is going to come in that we started with this experiment of coming up with new fields at the interface of heritage, science, and tech. So the Ministry of Education's IKS division also picked this up. So they asked us to make a report, they studied the scheme, etc. And then they said, now we are actually going to, they like the scheme. So they've expanded it now to come up with a set of 16 different minors that you can do. Every single discipline has some component of Indian knowledge systems, some science, some technology, humanities. And they said you can run a complete university if you want, purely on this basis. For example, anybody, whether you work in arts, science, commerce, any of these areas, you can work at the interface, you can bring your skills to bear on this topic. For example, you'll be surprised to know that there is somebody a lot of the details I cannot tell you, but there are some defense related inquiries, right? And they want to understand, how do we bring together, what is it that we can learn from the military strategies used from our history and heritage, and how do we reinterpret them and incorporate them as part of our current policies and doctrine, right? For example, Chanakya's talks has a lot of theories and about how do you view your adversaries, how do you classify your adversaries, how do you look at them, how do you devise strategies, etc., etc. And the beauty of these is that it has a wealth of knowledge of the behavior of people in these parts. right? That has been factored into these principles. And now, even if it is 1,000 years or 2,000 years, the set of people are the same, and their cultural instincts, the way they react, the way they respond to situations, broadly remains similar. And that is why these strategies become very, very important. And our geography is the same. Even in those days, what was the threat perception was kind of similar, because your geography is the same. You have your attack routes are the same, your dispersal routes are the same, your trade routes are still the same. You will see that even then the trade routes were largely the sea routes that were going. And if you look at how the sea trade happened, it is very, very similar to what's happening right now. So there is a lot of applicability there to bring in concepts from there to create a complete minor around economics and strategic sciences, about politics, political science, and strategic sciences. Similarly, the Indic system has, you will believe it or not, I don't know, but you have a wealth of treasure about recipes, right? So there's a wealth of understanding about recipes apart from what practically is known to every single grandmother in our country, right? And if you look at it, you have a fascinating story about how the recipes have come down all the way to our time from about hundreds of thousands of years. You will see the genesis of today's recipes in the documented recipes. That gives you a way to understand how people have actually used these systems, right? So culinary sciences are absolutely a place where something can be done in this. So you mix together an understanding of Indian culinary science with current nutrition, dietetics, etc., and then you bring them together. You can understand why our diet was so sustainable. What is it that we have changed today? What is it we should not change? Similarly, you look at there is a complete area. If you look at the advertisements put out by the Indian Knowledge Systems Division, they've called for proposals and work in the area of fashion, right? Indian Knowledge Systems Division making a call with one of the areas of proposal being fashion, right? And you'll be surprised, because India has a fantastic tradition of fashion. Out of the 64 kalas, a large part of it is about fashion, and they make this distinction between two kinds of fashion. You have self-grooming fashion, and then you have home decor and interior design, right? Both of them very lucrative fields today. What is stopping us from owning this field and coming up with purely Indic designs that will storm the market? Nothing. It is just that we have not put ourselves. Oh, that is exactly why we are out there to help, and the Indian Knowledge Systems Division is actually putting out calls for proposal. We are actually in the process of. We actually have a vehicle for incubation also. If people want to there are startups who want to work in the area of Indic stuff. We are there to bring all the relevant skills and knowledge in one place. And also, and it's in an IIT, so you obviously have access to variety of things that you want. We can bring in. It's neither more difficult nor less difficult than any other startup today, right? And are people getting into startups? Absolutely yes, right? It is just as easy as difficult.
To this topic, a few years ago, I visited Tirupati. I went to the Rashtriya Sanskrit University.
Yes.
There, I found that they were doing something very interesting research. They wanted to bring out science and technology related aspects which are preserved in the old manuscripts.
Yes.
And translate it into English. But the problem they told me was that they are experts in Sanskrit, but not in science and tech. So suppose you have something like they did publish certain books on astronomy and some other things, but their practical problem is that they don't have scientists with them. Is there any such collaboration
There
happening?
is exactly what we are doing right now. We are working with the Central Sanskrit University and Rashtriya Sanskrit Universities of Tirupati, and there is Central Sanskrit University in Delhi, which has many branches, many campuses across the country. We work very closely with all of them in bringing together people who understand, the traditional sciences, the Sanskrit people, the technologists, the scientists, bring them together to be able to. We are also running multiple such programs to introduced to scholars of the traditional disciplines an understanding of the current disciplines that are already there. Right? So, for example, like you said, a person who has an access to, let us say, Vyakaranam, right? Now, this person is introduced to current understanding of linguistics and how discourse goes in linguistics. In terms of Vyakaranam or grammar, Panini is recognized even today as one of the oldest and the best grammars. And it is hard to beat him even today. Even today, he is pretty much the state of art, to the extent that all other grammars are fashioned around Panini's work. But the point is, if a person who understands traditional Vyakaranam also understands the language of today's computational linguists, they can hold forth on their knowledge with a lot more elan and confidence and class, right? And that's exactly we are doing. For example, this summer we are going to be running a workshop in our in IIT-Hyderabad for students from Pathshalas and Gurukuls to tell them how the modern academic disciplines work. It's not that it is because there is a corresponding discipline for every discipline in the modern university system. We have an Indic discipline, but the languages are very, very different, right? To the point that an expert in the Indic discipline will feel out of place in a modern university because they don't know this language. So we are trying to bridge that gap, trying to tell them what is the language by which people talk and argue in this world. And then, there is no shortage of intelligence or smartness in the traditional scholars to hold forth. So this is some groundbreaking work we are doing along with Central Sanskrit universities, trying to bridge these modern disciplines with their corresponding Indic disciplines, so that the kind of work that you're talking about will be facilitated. Absolutely, it is required.
Do you offer minors, you said, right? Currently,
minors are being offered directly by the IKS division along with UGC. So if everything goes well, this August, there will be a nationwide rollout of those minors programs in 12 or 16 disciplines. Any person from any college will just be able to. So there is a UGC mandate that's around 5% of courses must be in Indian knowledge systems. So in lieu of this 5%, they can register for this minor. The minor will be offered centrally through MOOCs. And a student in any college anywhere in the country can sign up for one of these minors, and they maybe, let us say, they graduate with a BTech in computer science and a minor in Sanskrit linguistics, right? You graduate with an MBBS but with a minor in, let's say, yoga, right? You are graduating with, let us say, BAMS and with a minor in Indic materials and understanding of these things. Sorry, you graduate with MBBS and with a minor in, let's say, understanding Indic, Rasayana traditions, etc. You could graduate with a BDes, a bachelor's in design, with a minor in Indic design.
But I mean, I have some doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Suppose you say, for instance, a student who does MBBS, or maybe he does his PG,
Mm-hmm.
and then he wants to learn what is in Ayurveda. He can take this course, right?
He can take the minor, yeah.
He can take the minor. But the point is that do we have authentic Ayurvedic, I mean, these kind of sources, how genuine are they now?
Oh, come on. I mean, we have universities for Ayurvedic medical colleges and universities.
Have they been scientifically substantiated?
Oh, a lot of them
treatments.
are. Oh, you will see there are tons of there is an All India Institute for Ayurvedic Sciences. There are journals now coming out. The Western, even by the standards of Western validation that you are possibly talking, you can look at journals. There is. This is not even now. I mean, like 15, 20 years ago itself, there have been numerous articles about various Ayurvedic formulations in very respectable Western journals, right? Ashwagandha, its properties were described in modern journals. So
why I'm asking is that even now there is a popular perception that it is no match for allopathy. If something happens, of course, obviously people will go to allopathy. Ayurveda.
When you say something happens, what is that something? For example, if it's a life or death case, if it's an ICU case, definitely people will go there. But if it is a chronic complaint, right, it is the reverse. because if it's for chronic ailments, typically people go to Ayurveda, because allopathy is very good. It will keep hitting you with maybe a painkiller, right? But after some time you realize, how many painkillers will I take? Somehow it's not going away. Then you want to have some lifestyle changes. You want some kind of to get rid of these chronic illnesses. People typically go to Ayurveda. But if you are in a life-threatening scenario, then it is allopathy.
They talk about so many, this kind of herb, that kind of herb, the soma juice, this, but they are not available. Nobody knows what they are, right?
So, do we know what is there in crocin? Do you know what is there in any cancer medication? Do we understand its bio? We don't, right? How do we take them?
I didn't mean that.
Uh-huh.
I meant how suppose something is mentioned in that original text.
Correct.
Where do we find such things? And I mean, how to make that particular portion or
Oh,
whatever?
I mean, you have massive Ayurvedic pharma companies. You have all of them that are running. There is Dabur, there is Patanjali, there is Sadvaidya. There is so many pharma companies who are making medicines. So, for example, do you know what Cipla is making? Cipla is one of the biggest pharmas. Let's say, Cipla is there, Dr. Reddy. I mean, we are in Hyderabad, all pharma. Do we know how they work? Do we know what they make? So, do we stop eating medicines? How much of biochemistry do each of us understand? Right? But when it comes to Ayurveda, we somehow start with the position that it must be fake unless proved right. Right? So, hence, the burden of proof is on them. When it comes to other allopathic pharma company, the burden of proof is the other foot. So this is a perception game, and that is why I would expect that the media people should be the last persons to fall into this thing. You can't fall into the trap you set for others.
I'm just voicing the popular.
No, I completely understand.
So one more thing, coming back to after heritage, since you are a neuroscientist, you did your PhD in computational neuroscience. Now, compared to the West, where do we stand now in this particular? I mean, they are probing the frontiers of it. I mean, there is a lot of research happening. I mean, I find it very interesting. What is in the brain? I mean, where does the thought come from?
Mm-hmm.
What is in the microtubules? Is it a quantum field? What is happening? So where does India stand in its research in these topics? Because whenever I want to study about these things, I come across only works with foreigners.
So it depends on what we have been looking for. So if we look for journals and that kind of thing, to an extent it will be foreigners, because there are so many more foreign universities than us, right? But if we want to understand it from the Indic perspective, you will find only Indic books, right? So you will find because the authentic works are here. Even the foreigners who write on that are people who have come here, learned from the people here, and then who have written in English, and we consume them, right? So if you want anybody who wants to learn Tantra, he will say, go to Woodruff. Okay. You want to hear about neuroscience, now all of the things that we hear of are the ones that have come through the Western filters, right? So, and that is why it's because of the way we look for things.
No, I mean, in our universities now, where do we stand compared to their research?
Okay, so very honestly speaking, there are a large number of researchers working in these areas. When you look at yoga and looking at what is the efficacy of yoga, different practices of yoga, there are tons of papers on this from a large number of Indian researchers. Okay, but now if you ask me, has there been a significant coordinated push like the Chinese have for the Chinese medicine? Then I would say no.
Right? In neuroscience,
I know in neuroscience. So when you look at neuroscience for yoga, etc., I presume that's what you're asking. So have we taken control of the field in the way that Chinese have of Chinese medicine? No, we have not. Right? But is there no work happening? That's also not true. Lot of work is happening from different people. But what is possibly missing is a large coordinated institutional desire and push or mission or scheme to actually take control of things. And that will happen only when there is a single coordinated thing, because grassroots work can take it only so far. Now we have critical mass of researchers who do work on yoga, but lot more is needed, and they need to be molded into a strong mission.
Not specifically related to yoga, but in general about neuroscience.
So in general about neuroscience also, there is a lot of work that's happening in neuroscience. So Indian neuroscience researchers, there are a lot of universities that work on neuroscience. Notable amongst them is, of course, IISc, there is NCBST-IFR, there is a National Brain Research Institute, Manesa, there is NIMHANS, and every single IIT has a couple of researchers in the area of neuroscience. So there is a lot of presence in the area of neuroscience across all the various areas of neuroscience, whether it is cellular neuroscience, whether it is neurochemistry, whether it is computational neuroscience, whether it is systems neuroscience, vision, memory, cognition. Across all these areas, there are a lot of researchers in the area of neuroscience in India. A lot of good work is also happening from here, from India. But if you ask, are Indians the world leaders in neuroscience, then that's not the case.
Sir, actually, there is a thing that China is obviously leading in neuroscience these days, and one of the most important reason is funding. In neuroscience and for research and development, the funding has been a big challenge in Indian thing, and that's the reason a lot of neuroscientists go abroad and then they establish a big thing there. So what do you think about this? And
say okay, let's put it this way. Yes, Chinese have taken a huge step ahead in not just neuroscience, a lot of other things in general, even in biology and life science related areas. One of the prime drivers of research in all of biology, not just neuroscience, is funding, of course, one thing. But more than funding, the biggest factor there is the regulatory environment. Because all these experiments need regulatory clearances to be able to do that, right? And quite often for life science researchers, this regulatory hurdles are sometimes the biggest ones, starting from animal trials where there will be ethical issues, there will be animal rights activists who decide what kind of experiments can be done, cannot be done. So if you look at historically, when did or how did China take a decisive leap forward? China structurally, the way the country is organized compared to a lot of other democracies, they can bring down or take up the regulatory barriers. And they brought down regulatory barriers significantly. They pumped in funds. They rolled out the red carpet for Western researchers to come in and set up labs within China and replicate their research there. For researchers, this was a good deal because experiments that would take them so long to do in Europe or the USA, they can do it like this in China. So you are on the other side of the camera, I am on this side.
See, you also teach in the, they are like robots. No, but they are programmed in such a way that anybody who wants to be frustrated can go there into the West world. Midwest, American Midwest, and then shoot them down and then come back again. But can it be really done? Can they really recreate another human? Not human being as such, but going by the
humanoid.
A humanoid. And with the consciousness. Can they do it?
See, whether a humanoid can be created, I think it's already been done. A park like this also, is it possible to do? Very much yes. Is it desirable to do? It's anybody's guess. Okay. Okay. And in terms of consciousness, see, the word consciousness itself is not very well defined. So a lot of times people in neuroscience try to steer clear from a lot of very serious academicians tend not to use the word because it's not very clear. It means different things to different people. Okay. So what constitutes having a person with consciousness? It's not, there's no universal definition. it's not clearly defined. So that question is not easy to answer. It cannot be answered. For different people, consciousness means different things, right? So whether the ability to feel pain is enough, whether it is your midbrain areas that are deciding whether you're conscious or not. Is it the ability to experience the qualia? Is it the awareness that of knowing what is around you? There are a lot of intricacies there. So but very humanoid thing. I completely understand what you are talking of. It's basically a place where people can vent out their emotions on other people without having any legal repercussions. Okay, so so when it comes to this, I would say it is possible to do it, but is this the right way to is this going to satisfy people's needs, right? So a person who goes there gives vent to his feelings by actually going and killing somebody and coming back. Do you think it'll actually make him a calmer person now that I've gone there and killed somebody in the virtual world and come back, or will it lower his threshold to violence? Nobody knows that. Okay, so what if the goals of the society are to make people happy and peaceful? Whether this approach will succeed or not is not very clear. Personally, I don't think it will succeed. It will only lead to lowering the tolerance for violence. It will normalize violence. But if somebody is genuinely interested in having a set of people who are calm and happy, one would actually need to understand where happiness comes from, what leads to absence of happiness, and how do you enable those kinds of scenarios.
Response to someone asked you on Twitter, Heli Kalyan,
Mhm.
what do people do after graduating? You said are there any placements?
Mhm.
You said our students, they can't afford, companies try ask them, but they can't afford our students there. And so what are they doing? Now you have 3 batches that are passed out, right? So
Correct.
they have learned something. So some are entrepreneurs. What have they set up? Any particular example?
Right. So, for example, one of the students on the batch that passed out last year, the person already was the person actually had a medical college and hospital, right? So this person said, I want to take up yoga research within my organization in a big way. So let me train myself first, right? So this person came here, did this work, and now he's gone back and he set up a yoga research wing in his own hospital. He also continues to work with us in translating yoga related practices in his hospital, right? So another gentleman was working in a tech company, working in a tech company in one of the top places. So that is the context in which I said our graduates are too expensive for people to hire because this is a person who possibly already draws, I don't exactly know the number, but the gentleman possibly draws more than his LPA is 100 LPA, which is like more than 1 crore a year. And I don't think anybody can easily hire him at that level. But this gentleman wanted to do it because he wanted to get a taste for this discipline and at some time migrate to building technology for heritage. He came in here, did a fantastic job. He was, if I'm not mistaken, he was even the topper of the class, did a fantastic job. And this person is now dreaming up multiple data initiatives and products, doing things in self mode, trying to understand how to change things. Another person was already a researcher in this area, researcher in the broader area of psychology, etc. So this person, after our course, went back to continuing with her work, but now with a lot more emphasis on this, on yoga, etc. And so there is a lot of people. That is why I said our first batch, when we designed our programs, we said our first batch should not be job seekers, they should be job givers, right? So when our own graduates become job givers, that is when the virtuous cycle is going to start, right? And that's kind of what we focused, and that's why we said initially that we will not take fresh out of college people into our MTech programs. We will take people who are already successful in whatever their chosen careers are, and let these people come and do this work. So they'll lead the way.
Last question. Can you pay a visit to your lab and heritage lab?
Oh, sure. You're most welcome. All of you are most welcome. We can show you, the kind of work that we do across, data science, structures, visualization, yoga, architecture. Yes, we'll be most happy to to show you around. Some things are a little more intangible. You can't really see them. For example, algorithms and stuff. But whatever is in the form of an application that actually comes out, why not? And we'll be very happy to show you what we are doing, show you the also the work that we are doing with other people, etc. But most welcome. I mean, anybody, all of you and every one of you is most welcome. We'll be very happy to host any others also who would like to come. That's the sole idea behind having this department. It's quite often as researchers we get an opportunity to discover something new or invent something new, but it's only very rarely that one gets an opportunity to discover or create a new discipline in itself, which creates a lot of other things, right? So I think this opportunity has been something that's fantastic, that we've had an opportunity to create a new discipline rather than creating one product or one.
This is the first of its kind.
Yes. It's the first of its kind. Not that it was never there. It was being done as individual, projects by individual PIs in different universities.
Separately for that.
No. But having a full department or the breadth that we span, I don't think it is anywhere there.
So I have one question. Technical. So we talk about Ayurveda and agriculture. It's always been kind of a conflict. But then, and you see, Ayurveda and yoga have been a way of life in our context in Indian subcontinent. But now, why is this Ayurvedic system is being kind of termed as quackery? It's somewhere it's coming in that bracket of quackery.
You're already late. He already answered that question.
No, that's fine. So this is a slightly different kind of question. Okay, I'll tell you so how do we define quackery today, right? There are multiple reasons at different levels. Sometimes when we do not understand something, that is magic. Okay, magic with bad intent is quackery in a way, right? So magic by impersonation, etc., is what becomes quackery, right? So first of all, when we are conditioned, the way we are conditioned is to look for evidence, right, wrong, correct, etc., from the way we have seen it, and that is always through allopathy, right? So with allopathy, we have from childhood, we know that if I have fever, I have to go to a doctor. He'll give me a paracetamol. I take it, and then I become normal. So after some time, we stop seeking validation for that. Whatever we are introduced to in our childhood, for that we don't seek validation because my experience is validation enough. Now, by corollary, whatever else comes along with it as a package, that also I don't seek validation. Because since this doctor is valid, that doctor is also valid, all doctors are valid. Right? So this is how our belief systems are built. Now, if you haven't been introduced to an Ayurvedic doctor, possibly at that time, and the first introduction happened maybe at 17 or 18, at the age where we are, always asking questions, etc. Right? This is the time you see it first. Then you will not even get started on it, and you will ask proof on why this works. Show me whether it works or not. And that's what I mean by saying the burden of proof is disproportionately on that person, whereas for allopathy it is not. So allopathy has a significant advantage because you get introduced to it as a default way of medicine. That's point number one. The second point being, a lot of times what happens is you do have some people, for example, some things can go wrong, right? So for example, somebody took some medicine from a village doctor, and then he showed up, his scan showed something bad, and then people said it's because of the medicine. So what will this be called? It will be called quackery. He is a victim of quackery. So now let us say you go to another doctor in a hospital, thought things will happen, and then the patient died. What will you call this? Medical negligence, right? So what is the difference between quackery and medical negligence? Here in this second case, you absolve the system and say the negligence was individual. In this case, you say it is quackery, subtly implying that the system is at fault, right? So why do we see it different? Again, it comes back to the first point, because there is some bias in our head that this system is hunky-dory. It has served me well in the past. Hence, in this case, when something happened, it is medical negligence, catch hold of that fellow or the college in which he studied, right? But in the other case, we call the system quackery because I don't have sufficient proof of evidence from before. Personally, I don't have, right? So this is subtly how it gets labeled, and I'm only talking of very benign intent people talking. There is a whole lot of people with an agenda who will want to make it quackery. That's I don't think that deserves a response at all. So
Thank you so much, Professor, for coming and sparing your time.
pleasure is all mine.
And we
Pleasure is
enjoyed
all.
the conversation. I hope you did.
Absolutely, I absolutely enjoyed. I mean, and I hope really all of you enjoyed.
No,
I
it was
could
very
see
good.
she's struggling with some with a little bit of headache maybe, and but and she's all very cheerful now. So I'll be very. I hope I have been. I hope I have been. I've reduced the headaches and.
No, no.
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed it. Absolutely.